So my name's Zach Graham. I'm an assistant professor of biology at West Liberty University. So I do research, I teach. Most of my research, though, is focused on studying crayfish biodiversity and evolution and really all things crayfish.
Right. And your book is about crayfish, which I'm like trying to learn to say because I'm from the South, so I say crawfish.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with using a different term. The book's called Crayfish, Crawfish, Crawdad, and when I was thinking about titles, that had to be the title because everybody knows these animals as something else depending on where you're from. I'm from the Northeast, primarily that's crayfish, but you get on to the Southeast, it turns into crawfish, crawdad, depending on where you're at. It's all the same thing though.
Yeah, and you don't eat crawfish, right? Like I think
I,
that I read that in the book.
I do not because I'm ironically allergic. I have nothing against it, but I'm actually kind of like deathly allergic to shellfish. Um, and so the last time I had something like a crayfish, like a shrimp, was quite a long time ago. But yeah, I don't eat them. I have nothing against eating them. I think it's a great cultural tradition and interesting way to, you know, learn about them. But yeah.
Yeah, I grew up, with crawfish festivals all the time. I mean, I lived in Northwest Florida, and so we went to New Orleans a lot. And, one of everybody's favorite things to do in New Orleans is get like a big plastic bag of crawfish and eat them on the street, which
Yeah,
is,
yeah. So I've actually
special.
never experienced that. I've been to one crawfish boil. I've never been in the southeast though. The one that I went to was actually in Arizona. Um,
Wow.
it's a good time. People do that everywhere. Because
Hmm.
it's fun, it's interesting, it's different, it's tasty. So
Yeah, totally. So what would you say that is the audience of your book? It's I feel like the tone is so inviting and kind of funny, but it is super informational book.
yeah, the audience is really for anyone who's interested in nature, who's interested in learning about, some animals that are probably underappreciated and unknown. Many people think that these crayfish are just like boring brown bugs and there's nothing cool about them. And that's far from the truth. So, really, anybody that's interested in nature, interested in our ecosystems, especially in North America, there's crayfish around the world, but my book focuses on North American crayfish, where most of them reside. So, that's what I would say. I try to keep it entertaining. I try to keep it informational. There's nothing else like this for these organisms, and so that's kind of my motivation for it all.
That makes sense. Yeah, I noticed that. I wanted to ask you, like your personal story is sort of embedded, or like these little stories of like, going into a ditch in the side of the road and fishing around for crawfish
Mhm.
and stuff like that. How did you decide like how to tell this story? Because it does read like a story of a creature in scene.
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously never written a book like this, but all of my writing, my scientific writing, I was always taught, and all my presentations, everything as a scientist, I was always told that it needs to be a story. And so it needs to be a story, it needs to have an introduction, it needs to have a hook, it needs to have a conclusion. Um, and so I figured the best way to do this was to tell stories not just of myself, but of all the other crayfish biologists who've been doing this before I've been born. Because I'm, 30 years into it, whereas other people are 60 years into it. So, they have a lot of experience. So I wanted to kind of tell their stories as well as my own experiences with it.
Yeah, I mean, I had no idea about anything
Hmm.
about this. They seem like the most amazing little creatures. I'll tell you my favorite part. I believe that I have the page written down. I
Yeah.
believe it is page 78, about when, what happens when you give a crawfish cocaine,
Yeah.
and things like that. That was like the
Yeah.
best page. Such a good page.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad I think it's really interesting because even, a lot of times people that aren't interested in nature, they're kind of more interested in, let's say, human biology or interested in learning about pharmaceutical drugs and whatnot. And I always like tell them these stories that, real scientists give crayfish drugs in order to learn about what they do to their biology and their behavior. And so it's super interesting. And, there's a lot of literature on that. I covered a small bit. And there's new papers every month being written on, giving crayfish different drugs and whether it's like related to a human drug or just any type of stimulus. It's kind of interesting.
That's super interesting. And I love how I mean, it starts with like just like their reactions. And then this idea that like I feel like I've had like many a night tipsy and talking about what happens when, different animals get a hold of the alcohol that is spilled down the street in New Orleans.
Hmm.
So it's like these like things that are like, actually, is that happening? And there's actually an answer. There are people studying that, but then it gets really serious and talks about like SSRIs and just like how useful this has been, which I found to be like really inviting, because I don't think that like if I were just reading about SSRIs and crawfish, I mean, I might be interested because I have seen so many crawfish die in my
Hmm.
life. But yeah, I thought it was a really good technique. And then I wanted to ask you about your titles, which are hilarious. Almost all of them are so funny.
Yeah.
Why did you choose to like kind of create this like, amusing tone throughout?
Yeah, honestly, I think it's just really not that serious, and I wanted it to be fun. I wanted it to be welcoming, and I didn't want it to be too obvious or crude. I wanted it to be one of my best friends, Josh, who helped me with a lot of the writing and just the ideas. He always said write like whimsically, and he always said to, be a little playful. And I think he kind of took that out of me, and we started, toying around with these funny names. And every single chapter and section title, there was like five different ones that I had in my mind. But then I ended up kind of like always choosing the kind of playful, whimsical, funny one. So it was pretty intentional, and it's not like I had this big master plan to do that, but it kind of worked out that way.
I mean, they're awesome. It's so funny. I think I wrote some of my favorites down, like Party Down Under and The Secret Lives of Burrowing Crayfish,
Yeah.
A Dinner Fit for a Queen. I mean, just like awesome. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
just, little tidbits, little stories. I think that was something that helped me a lot is kind of breaking up the stories into, I have like a big theme, but then I kind of break it up into these little subsections, and that helped me compartmentalize really a lot of the story and what I wanted to kind of convey with each section.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And you said that it's not that serious. And I think that, I get that. But also, like, since you study, this creature, I wonder how the things that you know about it kind of do fit into really important conversations, because I feel like that is threaded throughout the book, just like how these different ecosystems contribute to each other and can hurt each other.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely be doom and gloom, and a lot of people I work with, a lot of scientists are doom and gloom, and sure, I can do that. But at the end of the day, really, I'm just trying to educate people about these animals that I love, that I, have clearly spent a lot of time thinking about and learning about, and um, that was kind of the overarching goal. It wasn't meant to be, too deep or anything like that. Even though obviously, as you noticed, it can be, if you wanted to really think about the, uh, you know, big picture view of it all.
Mm-hmm. So, what is like one of your favorite things to tell people about crawfish? I mean, I personally love the cocaine page, but also the color discussion is
Yeah,
amazing.
I think that is my favorite because, I'm a great example of this. I grew up in southwestern Pennsylvania, right outside of Pittsburgh. And I spent my entire childhood catching crayfish. Like I was just one of those outdoor kids, catching bugs and whatnot. And I didn't know anything about them scientifically until I was probably, probably 22, 23 years old. And I didn't know that they were, diverse. I didn't know that there was more than one species. I didn't know that they could be colorful. I didn't know that they lived in all these habitats. And so, kind of like my number one message is just talking about diversity, that we have, for example, one species of human, now eight species of bear. We have 400 species of crayfish in the United States only, but 700 everywhere. And so throughout that 700 species, we have lots of colors, shapes, sizes, behaviors, habitats, different ecological functions. And so that's like my number one favorite thing to talk about is just the different kinds. And really my research is trying to understand why they are so diverse and how they got that way. So, that's kind of what really drives me a lot.
Sense. And I love the discussion in your book about why something that like lives in the mud would be like super bright blue with like orange or red on it. And I was thinking about how we just make metaphors out of everything. Like we humans are just like trying to like understand ourselves all the time through animals and everything that we
Yeah.
see. And just like that, the conflict with our like reasoning, it should be camouflaged, but
Hmm.
like that it might be blue. I'm going to probably get this wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe the reason is to like be like kind of like a sort of flamboyant warning to
Yeah.
predators.
Yeah. Like,
It's fascinating. I love it. It's like a glitter bomb.
yeah. And my favorite thing, with these colorful crayfish that live underground is we really don't know. Like we can speculate on what the function and what the potential evolution of a trait like bright blue coloration is with a species that lives underground. But at the end of the day, it's kind of speculation. And we can test hypotheses as scientists, or we can speculate, just as, chit-chatting about it. But we really, as of right now, don't know. And that's kind of, a lot of what drives my research as well is just it's so cool that we don't know these things, and I get to try to figure them out as a scientist, and I get to tell stories about them as a writer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a super cool job. I'm like very jealous. My job
Yeah.
is not that interesting. Like I would much rather try to figure out why that crawfish is blue than
Yeah.
things that I do all day.
Yeah.
And then like the other thing that I found really interesting is the like family systems or something. I mean, that's not, I don't think you ever used that
No,
word. I'm coming up with that word, but like
yeah. I
just how
mean,
they like live together.
yeah, really just everything. When we think of crayfish or crawfish or crawdads, we think of them living in a stream, a creek, a pond. But what we've been talking about are these burrowing species, which live kind of on land, but then they dig down to the water. And they're so different than everything you've ever thought of this kind of like crustacean that lives in the water. And oftentimes they have multiple generations of offspring in there. So they kind of take care of their young for an extended period of time, potentially multiple generations. Um, and then again, that's what we think they're doing, but we can't go down there and watch them that easily. We can kind of make some guesses about what they're doing, but there's a lot of unknown in the secret lives of these burrowing crayfish, which is another thing that really kind of drives me, and that I love talking about is those burrowing species.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really fascinating to me. I mean, I don't, I've been researching beavers actually, so I was really excited when you were comparing crawfish to beavers, and I definitely want to know. I want to talk about that a little bit, just because like it's to me it's like a really fascinating like uh comparison, but there just aren't that many creatures that stay with their families or that have like same sex living conditions.
Hmm.
And I don't like, for me, I'm not like that interested in making too much of it. I just find it so interesting that they're like kind of mean looking and
Hmm.
yet seem to be like hanging out and not like tearing each other up all the time.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. They they have big claws, most of them, so they're kind of intimidating and whatnot. But as far as especially like a little invertebrate, like a little crustacean, the crayfish are very good parents, especially the mother, of course. The father maybe does a little bit of guarding and whatnot, but the mother takes care of them for a pretty extended period of time, and that's very different than something like a lobster, who they're related to that live in marine environments. But a lobster, their strategy is, 50,000 eggs, let them go, never see them again. The
Exactly.
crayfish, yeah, the crayfish, they maybe have, anywhere from a dozen to a few hundred eggs, and then they take care of them pretty substantially and at least help them grow for the early stages of their lives.
It's amazing. I've been watching these like life cycle videos with my students. So I am like learning, I'm just already like learning about all these bugs and stuff, like whatever kids want to learn about. I'm like, sure, we'll find out the life cycle of an ant, whatever,
Yeah.
you know?
Hmm.
But I haven't, I mean, what I've noticed in doing this is that so many animals just like have their babies and leave. Like they're just like later, like most that I've watched, I haven't actually watched a single video about good parent
Yeah,
animal.
it's pretty rare with a invertebrate like a bug or a crustacean or a spider because they're so small and they don't live that long. It's like not the best strategy to take care of them for a long period of time. That's more of like a mammal thing to do or a
Mhm.
vertebrate. But there are some, invertebrates like certain species of spiders, scorpions, crustaceans like crayfish also, that will take pretty good care of their young. Or at least for a little bit longer than what you would expect.
Mhm, mhm. So, what is a beaver believer?
Yeah, I really like that. You mentioned one of the titles of my book, and my favorite one is Beavers Without a Backbone, because once I wrote that, I was like, that's genius. There's no way that I'm
Mhm.
not including that. Because the whole idea is we learn about beavers being ecosystem engineers. They create a structure and it completely changes, and the structure is their dam, and it completely changes the habitat. Um, And so a lot of people, know about the beavers because they're a pretty, common, maybe cute looking mammal, quite large, and they've had some pretty big impact on North America specifically. And so I tried to make the kind of comparison to crayfish, who don't make dams, but they build burrows. And there's oftentimes hundreds of thousands of crayfish in specific environments, all of them building little burrows, which creates little nooks and crannies for every single other animal you could think of to live in. Fish live in there, little bugs live in there, other crayfish live in there, frogs, snakes, everything you could think of really can rely on a crayfish burrow for a pretty, you know, it's a pretty good habitat to live in because it's nice and consolidated. It's kind of temperature regulated. So a lot of animals kind of have adapted to live and rely on these burrows that the crayfish make. So I think it's a good kind of ecosystem engineering comparison between the beaver believers and the crawfish believers or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the crayfish frog. It's like that seems like such a funny animal, like that they just like
Yeah.
go and like stay there in
Mhm.
little
Yeah, and
holes.
they have this home and they don't leave because it's not easy to build this big, nice underground temperature controlled structure if you're a frog. But if you're a crayfish, that's like your everyday activity essentially.
Yeah, that's awesome. It reminds me of I have a pit bull who's kind of like that. Like he's not very good at anything, but he'll totally just take whatever you make for him and stay with
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
um, I love that. Okay, let me see here. Oh, how long did it take you to write the book? And like what made you decide to go ahead and do it? Because it seems like a great deal of research is compiled in this book.
Yeah, I think from the day that I knew that I was gonna write it, like I was committing to it, until the book was finished, it was probably between 2 and 3 years. I wrote it between late 2020 and I probably finished in 2023 completely, more or less. So it's been, kind of done. The majority of it has been done quite a while ago. And yeah, so it took me about 3 years, I would say, for that. And that's pretty much waking up every day at 5 a.m. and writing for 2 to 3 hours before I go into work. Um, I kind of love the ritualistic, nature of that, and it kind of helps me. So it wasn't too hard for me. I just had a lot of espresso early in the morning, and I could just kind of, right away. Yeah, I really wanted other people to learn about crayfish, and I was learning about them. And the only way you can do this is by reading these like 100-year-old books or, 70-year-old journal articles of some biologist who went out into central Georgia and, saw these animals. And so I wanted to make something just accessible because I was learning about them and I knew that they were really cool, but I knew nobody else was going to read the type of things that I was reading and kind of making all the connections. And so really, I just wanted to make a story in a book that told all the big ideas and topics that are relevant to crayfish, whether it be their ecology, their diversity, their conservation issues is a huge one. And so that's really, kind of the goal. And it took a few years to do the research and all that, but a lot of it I kind of knew. I just needed to tell in a way that I thought was more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what was the publishing process like?
Yeah, so I actually, you mentioned the beaver believers, which is a term that Ben Goldfarb, who wrote a book called Eager on beavers, I actually reached out to a bunch of authors randomly who wrote similar books on it, understudied or underappreciated animals. And he reached out back to me. He got back to me, and I just had a bunch of questions and I called him on the phone and I talked to him for like an hour. And he kind of told me how this all happens. I don't know anybody that's really written a book like this. So he ended up helping me out a lot, started writing a bunch of proposals, pitched it to maybe, you know, 10 or 15 different places. Eventually, once I found somebody that was really into it, my publisher is at UNC Press, University of North Carolina. North Carolina is a great place for crawfish. A lot of these people grew up kind of catching these animals, so they kind of got it. Like they understood why it was interesting, whereas some other publishers and maybe like, Vermont didn't or Connecticut. Um, but yeah, so kind of ended up forming that relationship, and I had a lot of the book written by the time I already got the contract. So it was kind of like easy from that stage. I just had to wait and let them make it what it is now.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And that's awesome. I'm like, I was kind of like anti social media, anti internet for a really long time. In the last couple of years, I have just fully leaned into like the randomly contacting people whose work I like vibe. And I
Yeah.
think that's a great strategy. It's just like hard to be authentic in this world. And that is actually like DMing somebody on Instagram, I think is like one of the only ways to do it these days. So I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah. And a
Mhm.
lot of I've been doing that forever, just like randomly emailing people that I think do interesting stuff or that I want to talk to. And, of course, most of them you never hear back from, but sometimes get someone that's interested. And now when students or anyone emails me and wants to learn about crayfish, of course, I'm like, jumping on that, willing to, talk to anybody. And so I kind of appreciate when other people do the same.
Yeah, totally. Are you planning to do like any kind of, I mean, this is like a book that I feel like is, it's not like creative nonfiction, but it's not like super academic either. I mean, it's sort of an in-between
Yeah.
genres book. So are you like doing a tour or are you like going to schools to do presentations? Are you doing
You
anything like
know,
that?
I have some local outreach things planned. I'm hopefully going to be going to some conferences, like Appalachian Book Conference. I'll probably do a little bit of that. Nothing huge planned. Definitely willing and wanting to do as much as I can though. So just trying to get it in as many people's hands as possible, really.
Yeah, I was thinking about some of the museums, like in New Orleans specifically, because I didn't really go to museums when I was a kid because
Hmm.
we were just eating and walking around.
Yeah.
But I, as an adult, have gone to the
Hmm.
museums that I should have been going to my whole life, and there's a lot of like stuff like this. And I was just thinking, like, I bet people would just love to know like all this information. It's so fascinating, and like the fact that they're like just this world under the ground that we're walking on
Hmm.
is like unsettling but
Yeah.
cool. you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and this, my one of my favorite things, I teach zoology, so I teach, undergraduate students about animals, and I kind of like they understand how deeply I care and love and want to learn about crayfish and how I'll never know everything that I want to. And you could do that for every single animal, plant, bacteria, fungi. Like there's people that just take it to the extreme and that try to know as much as they can and they never will. And that's kind of the fun part of it all. But yeah, it's just there's so much going on that when I think of it's hard for me to think about other organisms because I just want to save all my like brain memory for crayfish related knowledge. It's kind of the way that I feel about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I love that like emphasis on curiosity. It's I think a lot of times, I'm a speech pathologist, so I work in kind of a weird in between place too, because it's like everybody thinks that they know what language is because we all talk, or most of us talk, and but it's very like scientific and not what we think it is made of very often.
Yeah.
And I feel like often people who are not working in scientific fields think that science is not like the most generative and creative and curious place, which is so weird to me. Like it's where it all is actually
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
world. So
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that plays a huge role, and it's interesting because I don't view myself as being creative, or at least I maybe historically haven't, but I'm kind of like starting to, get that, or starting to understand that that's something that maybe I'm actually pretty good at. At least like in the realms of science, in the realms of education, maybe not in like the traditional, art class type realms. Um, but yeah, I think it's a really important part, just having new ideas and being able to think about, different aspects of research or education in different ways is definitely an important skill.
yeah, totally. And I just love how, like, when you're researching something, if you find out that you were wrong for 20 years about it, I mean, sometimes I feel like maybe it's a little bit of a letdown, but for the most part, it's like, oh, cool. Well, that opens up something new. Like, it's like not threatening for information to change in
Yeah,
science.
yeah, it's hard to once you experience that a few times, you kind of feel like, oh, I was wrong. My hypothesis wasn't supported or whatever. But then you realize, as you mentioned, it's just about learning. That's really what it is. It's not, I don't have an agenda. I don't have anything like that. I just want to learn. I just want to teach people. A lot of the stuff I say sometimes may be wrong, but wrong is kind of subjective because maybe there's just some more information that I don't know.
I love that. Is there anything that you left out of the book that you like really like?
There's a lot, and that was honestly the hardest part for me is figuring out what stories to tell. That's the way I think about it, because I have a few kind of chapters about my own personal experiences, a few chapters focusing in on some other biologists. And so there's a, I could have written this book multiple times over with different stories. Um, and so some of the topics that I wish I could have probably gotten into a little bit more. I didn't get that deep into cave crayfish. I just kind of mentioned that they exist. There's these crayfish that have adapted to live in caves, and it's evolved multiple times, and they're completely white, and they don't have pigment, and they have really long antennae. Most of them are blind and don't have eyes at all, and they're really cool and interesting. So that's a whole another subset of topics that I could talk about with diversity and conservation and ecology. Um, and I don't think there's a lot more to be written on really the cultural and aquaculture, the farming essentially of crayfish. That's something that, I don't have a ton of experience with. I've never lived or spent significant amount of time in the true South where this is culturally extremely relevant. And so I think that probably deserves a little bit more, definitely. Those are the two kind of topics that come to mind is, the cultural tradition of farming and consuming crayfish. I of course talk about it, but it could probably deserve a little bit more. And then the cave crayfish.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I one thing that I've always thought, like, and I even when I was the last time I was in New Orleans and like there was like a little mini festival thing, people just like, I don't know, like maybe a family thing, but there's just so many of them. Like people just eat such a volume of these animals. And it like I'm not a huge fan like myself. Like I've tried them, it's fine, but like not it's not my bag to like suck on a bug.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird. My dad loved it. He loved to like bother me with it.
Yeah.
Um, but it's just like the like when I think about it, I'm like I always am thinking like where do they come from? Like it's this pile that is like this. They bring like a truckload of these
Hmm.
dead bugs. You know?
It's amazing, and they're consumed very heavily in the United States, primarily in the South, but then worldwide, it's a completely different scale. Most of this now, like when we think in America, we think of going to a common restaurant, like a bar or something like that, and we get like, wings and fries. In a lot of Asian countries, they'll get crawfish and they'll
Mhm.
consume crawfish, and that's like their kind of communal appetizer snack that is everywhere. And so it's like one of the most popular dishes that are out there. So these things are consumed in crazy numbers, and farmed and produced in really high numbers for being a freshwater, crustacean.
Yeah, it's wild to me. Like I like kind of have to delete it from my mind because I'm like, actually, where are these places that are creating these volumes?
Yeah.
Crawfish, like where's it located? I don't want to go there.
Yeah, I mean it's just massive ponds that they repeatedly drain, and they'll put crawfish in there, and then they'll put water back during the breeding season, so they all come out of their burrows, and it's this
Oh,
huge complicated cycle. And oftentimes they do a dual crop system too. So they'll do the crawfish, which are produced during one time a year, that grow the most during one time a year, and then they'll do some crop like rice is the biggest one, and rice is relatively easy to grow. And what happens is the crayfish eat the old rice, parts of the rice, and they get the nutrients, and then they go to the bathroom and they fertilize the soil, and then the rice that comes next time is fertilized, and it's like this kind of mutual system.
that's wild.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Like I love knowing that. Well, what are you working on now? Are you, because it's been a while since you finished this, which I think is one of the most awkward parts of the publishing process. It's like once you get to talk about your book, it's been done for so long that you're kind of like,
Yeah.
yeah.
There, there was like a 6 month period where I felt like I didn't even write the book. Like that, it felt like stuff wasn't moving super fast, at least from my perspective, but it was in the background. So it is kind of strange. Now it's like picking back up because it's coming
Mhm.
out soon. So now I'm like thinking about it more, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is awesome. Um, but I'm really just working on, trying to get through the winter, trying to, write a lot of research papers, trying to I have a few students that I'm trying to make sure that they can write their papers and graduate on time and things like that. So, just kind of normal academic stuff, no crazy big projects like books or anything like that, for me. So it's kind of nice having that out of the way, because I spent a lot of time on it, obviously.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, like I want to read a whole book about the cave guys. Like that
Yeah.
sounds like it's like I feel like fantasy is a really big deal right now. Like everybody is reading about like and writing about all of these like hybrid creatures or whatever. And I'm
Hmm.
just thinking like this could go in so many fun directions.
Yeah,
Because it's,
definitely.
that's the I feel like the underwater world is not as popular right now. It's like, fairies and dragons and things that fly, but like it's just a matter of time before we're back in like the maritime fantasies and all that stuff. Like we're almost there. That's my belief anyway. I think we're
Yeah,
gonna be all up in the mermaids again soon.
we got to get the crawfish up in there.
We do, I think. And like, I mean, all of them, like I find like I know more about crabs than any other critter in that
Hmm.
regard, just because I like caught them a bunch when I was growing up and had to deal with them. And they're so mean to each other.
Ooh,
They're
yeah.
like feisty little fuckers. Like they are like so mean.
Yeah, yeah. Crayfish can be pretty quick. They can be pretty mean, but crabs are a different level. They're like so strong, for their size. It's amazing. An average, crab pinch is like the worst crawfish pinch ever. Essentially, they can definitely be pretty feisty.
Yeah, yeah. And they're like mean to each other.
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
really mean to each other. Like when you put them in a bucket or whatever, it's like, I mean, you gotta like get them out of that bucket pretty soon.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's
definitely.
gonna
It's
go to
it's
hell.
the same. It's the same way with some of the crawfish as well.
Okay.
Some of them are pretty aggressive, and they, kind of get stressed out a little bit, as you can imagine.
Yeah. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to talk about your book?
I think the other like big message that I love talking about is the whole conservation message. And so
Yeah.
we have all these crayfish in the United States, approximately 400 different species, different types of them in the United States alone. And the estimates are like that half of them are facing severe conservation threats. And that's because we're doing things to our freshwater and terrestrial environments that aren't really good for them. We're damming them up, we're polluting them, we're building bridges, we're, you know, logging, nearby. And so there's a lot that has been done to our habitat. That the crayfish, they've been here for, in the United States in Appalachia 250 million years at least. So they've been here for a long time, and a lot of their populations are declining. So that's kind of a big message of my book as well, is telling that conservation story and kind of linking it to why we should care about them and ways that biologists are trying to conserve them.
Sense. And I was thinking about that a lot too, just because of, like when I'm reading books like this one, I like to think about like sort of the larger social and political conversations that are like that these things are shining these like unexpected lights on. And I feel like often when we think about the environment, we have this very macro view. Like we don't think about the fact that there's like a bazillion burrows under our feet, for example, because that would make us never ever want to walk on the fucking ground, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
But but like the importance of those, all those different little homes and all those like little tiny things. And just like, when we talk about things like climate change, people are thinking about like a comet hitting the planet instead of thinking about how like if all those critters are dead under our feet, then the ground starts to be different and then the big things start to change and all that stuff. So I
Yeah.
really liked that sort of world building around these guys and then bringing it up into our lives and what, how it could impact all of us. I thought that was really good.
Yeah, yeah. Big changes usually start with little changes, and even though the crayfish are pretty small in size, there's a lot of them, and so, when you lose populations of any different type of species, things change. Typically for the worse. Sometimes not so bad, but there's a lot of reasons we should care and protect about not just the crayfish, but really every organism that's out there that's been there for significantly longer than we have.
Yeah, like significantly. Like it's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Like
amazing.
you can't even put it into perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really amazes me. Because I'm from Florida, I've like kind of had this on my mind my whole life. My dad was a park ranger too, so he was always talking about different animals because he was teaching people about different animals on little tours and
Yeah.
stuff. Um, but just like, in Washington, for example, I see like a hawk or like maybe a raccoon occasionally, definitely deer, but that's like there's like no animals here. But in
Yeah.
Florida, it's like there are alligators and turtles and snakes and all of the things. I mean, like, and so many bugs. And it's like, but all of these things are like we're like hacking at the world to make space for humans in places like Florida. Like they will just take over the minute you leave.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's so interesting to just think that like they've been doing that forever. Like we are really not that important, but somehow we're destroying them too.
Hmm.
Like just this like fight for space is very interesting to me and I think just so important. Like we're so meaningless to the environment if we just walk away from it.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. It's gonna exist and do what it's been doing for, ever.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thank you for listening to Totally Biased Reviews, hosted by Asha Dore, produced by Asha Dore and Rebecca Torino Collinsworth.